This is a clip from Basketball at the Bar Live. We're going to keep it rolling here. So next up, we have the LA Clippers. They finished last season with a 42-40 record. They missed their best player in Kawhi Leonard. He was out the entire season. And they missed their second best player in Paul George in that dreadful play-in game. He was out due to COVID. They lose and they miss the NBA playoffs. Quite unfortunate if you are a Clippers fan, because just like the Lakers, Calvin, they traded almost all their picks and assets for a player in Paul George. Let's talk about what they can do this offseason to improve, get back to the NBA playoffs. Before we do that, I just want to touch on the depth chart and the salary cap, and then we can jump right into it. As of right now, the starting point guard is Reggie Jackson. Paul George fills in the 2, Kawhi Leonard at the 3, Nicholas Batum at the 4, and Zubac is at the 5. Paul George is under contract for 3 more seasons, Kawhi Leonard as well. Marcus Morris has got 2 years left on his contract. Norman Powell's got 4 years left. Robert Covington was just re-signed. 2 more years for him. Luke Kennard has got 3 years left on his contract. Terrence Mann's got 3 years left as well. And then we have guys like Reggie Jackson, Zubac, Batum are all entering in the last year of their deal. Rodney Hood and Isaiah Hartenstein are both expiring at the end of this season. Calvin, what do you like? What do you dislike about this Clippers team? What can they do to get back to the NBA playoffs and actually become a title favorite like they were just 2 seasons ago?
Well, this team is in a very similar situation, as you already kind of touched on, to the other team in LA. They've got a ton of money committed to some really, really high-level players who have had issues being healthy and playing games over the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. But when they are healthy, you have to like them as one of the better teams, in the Western Conference or in the entire league. This is a team that has definitely committed to the new era of small ball. So I question, is whether that is still the philosophy going forward. But like you mentioned, they don't have a first-round pick this year. They've got a ton of money committed, so they would probably love to add people in free agency. But again, you only have so much money to spend. So this team seems like it's already pretty complete to me. I think that you mentioned they've got a bunch of guys entering the last year of their deal, which means next offseason could be the big one for the Clippers, where they really go crazy, make a bunch of moves. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, let's be honest, is just going to depend on what does Kawhi Leonard look like when he comes back. If he returns to being one of the top 5 to 7 players in the league, they're in a great spot. Having him and Paul George healthy, that's a two-man combo that most teams would only dream of having. Mm-hmm. This is also one of the best three-point shooting teams in the NBA. They shot it absolutely lights out last year. I know you really love Robert Covington, the versatility that he brings defensively, as well as stretching the floor. For me, Nicholas Batum is the one, like, real easy or easiest, I guess, quick fix I can make with this team. Trying to re-sign him to maybe a multi-year deal, or at least hoping that he opts in for the last year of his contract, because, again, his versatility, the defensive versatility that he brings on this team is really underrated, I think. Brandon Boston Jr. is another intriguing young player. Terrence Mann has had his moments. So I think this team is honestly going to be pretty set roster-wise already moving into next year.
Yeah, I totally agree. This team is pretty set for next year. They already have $170 million committed towards next year's salary. You're building around Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It's crazy, man. Kawhi Leonard's only 30 years old. That is hard to stomach, because the guy's been in the finals for multiple teams. He's got multiple trophies, and he's only 30 years old, missed the entire last season. So him coming back is going to be absolutely key for this Clippers team. But yeah, I mean, you look at the roster: George, Leonard, Morris, Powell, Covington, Kennard. They're all locked up long term. I expect all these guys to return to this team. If I were to look at one position that I think needs improvement, or that I think this Clippers team has, I guess, downgraded at since they were the title favorite to win it, and that's the point guard position. I know you like Reggie Jackson. I'm not a huge Reggie Jackson fan. I'm just not. I think if I were to compare him to like an NFL player, it'd be a guy that excels during the regular season and falls apart in the playoffs. And
he was really big for them in the playoffs 2 years ago.
I know he was. And he had an amazing season last year, 16.8 points per game. But I feel like they need a Rondo. They need a Pat Beverly. They need a guy like that to play the point on this team. They really do. Rondo's a free agent. We mentioned him potentially going to Boston, re-signing with the Cavaliers, or could potentially come to a team like the Clippers and play exceptionally well. If I'm the Clippers, I'm looking to upgrade that point guard position, and that's not going to be easy. We don't have the draft pick, right? And you can't trade consecutive draft picks, so the Clippers don't have a draft pick to trade for a while. Reggie Jackson's entering the last year of his deal at $11 million. I'm not sure how good of a trade chip he really is, but if it's me, that's really the only position I'm trying to improve on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, yes, ideally, we've already heard rumors this offseason around the Clippers involving guys like John Wall and, other high or high caliber names of point guard players. But again, you said it best, upgrading at the position. To me, Rondo or Pat Beverly is not an upgrade over Reggie Jackson. Yep. Especially if Jackson is the third option on my team offensively. I love him in that role. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't necessarily like to see them exchange Reggie Jackson for one of those guys. The only other position that we haven't talked about at all is center. What are they going to do here with Zubac, who has a team option for next year? Outside of him, they don't really have any big men on this team.
Yep.
So that's maybe my number one priority this offseason is either finding out a way to keep Zubac, or do we go out and look for his replacement before I address point guard?
Yeah, I like Zubac a lot. I also like Hartenstein, who's expiring at the end of this season, so we'll probably not be back next year with the team. Yeah, I don't think you swap Reggie Jackson for Rondo right away because Reggie Jackson makes a significantly more money than Rondo. But I'd be happy to bring Rondo as maybe a compliment. Maybe you start Rondo, or maybe you start Reggie Jackson and you bring Rondo in at times. But you're right. The center position is tricky for them. Zubac has played exceptionally well, but they're pretty thin at that position. So if Zubac is out.
And that's by design.
Yeah. If Zubac is out, who do they play? If Hartenstein doesn't return, do you play Robert Covington? He's the third-string center on this team. And the second-string power forward, you're already small with Batum out there. So you're right. It's a small lineup team. I love the 3-and-D ball. But that could be
maybe they go out and get
them.
P.J. Tucker to play center.
Yeah.
Like the Rockets did.
What about Rudy Gobert?
I mean, you're going to have to give up so much to get him. Yeah. They don't have any draft picks to trade either. I don't see that as a viable option.
I mean, you could give up, if you're just trying to match salary, you could give up Marcus Morris, Norman Powell, and Reggie Jackson, or Luke Kennard, and match salary.
That changes the style that this team plays so much.
It does.
And you're giving up a bunch of your either starting or high minute per game players.
Definitely.
At the wing position.
But think about the defense on that team. If you have Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Robert Covington, and Rudy Gobert all starting.
Yeah. Yeah, and you keep Luke Kennard, who was the best shooter, I think, percentage-wise on this team last year. He was leading the league at one point for a while. It's an interesting idea. But again, I go back to what Utah is asking right now for Rudy Gobert.
Too much.
And the Clippers don't have that available to give.
Yep. I think we're going to see this Clippers team basically come back, throw the exact same lineup out here as last year. They're just, they want health. That's all they want. Yeah. They want their best player in Kawhi Leonard. And it's amazing that they played it as well as they did last season without Kawhi Leonard. But as soon as Kawhi Leonard is back, this team is a completely different team. And hopefully he is back, because we haven't heard anything from him, good or bad.
Yeah. Well, we did actually hear a couple of very faint rumors that he might be ready for the playoffs if the Clippers were able to sneak in there. Who knows? Maybe that was actually a blessing in disguise that he didn't make a return and he can come back even more ready to play by the start of next season.
Yeah, very true. Any last words on the Clippers here?
I think we both said it the way that it's going to be for this team. They're sticking with what they got, sticking to their guns. They don't have a lot of flexibility here to make any serious moves or changes, I think. If
you are a Clippers fan, make sure you hit that like button down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Calvin and I will be covering the LA Clippers and many other teams this offseason and into next season, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, if you liked or disliked what Calvin and I said as far as what they need to do this offseason, let us know down below in the comments. We would absolutely love to hear. So much for watching. As always, please don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can join us live every single weekday, Monday through Friday.